Hello, everyone. It's just another day in the life as a military wife. And this week, there's just been a lot going on the international stage that I just felt like should be discussed. I really would much rather talk about fun Christmas content, but I've got some of that coming, and don't worry, we will hit the fun stuff soon. But I felt like there were some things that needed to be at least, informed of, let you guys, in case you're not aware of what's been going down. So, as always, I am your host, Sam Wolf, and you are listening to Life of a Military Wife. Okay, first thing that I want to talk about, well, I don't really want to talk. It's hard to talk about, but it needs to be talked about, is the situation that's going on in Iran currently. Hopefully, maybe, I don't know how you could not have heard about this, but maybe you haven't. Back in September, a 22-year-old Kurdish Iranian woman was detained by the morality police. Her name was Masha Amini, and I apologize if I mispronounced that. But anyway, she was detained by the morality police for not properly wearing a hijab, supposedly. She was beaten and killed, and while in custody. And this has sparked massive protests that are still continuing, which is unprecedented. Um, According to the Turks and the UN Human Rights Council on Thursday, they have called for an independent, impartial, and transparent investigation of the process of what's going on with human rights violations of these protesters. As of now, over 300 individuals have been killed. 47, I think it's around there, were children. Um, and there's even more have been uh, detained. I think it's somewhere near, 14,000, 1,400, yeah, 14,000 have been arrested in demonstrations, unarmed demonstrations, by the way. And so the Iranian government is saying that they are terrorists and they're a threat and all of this other stuff. But for the most part, this has been peaceful protests. Um, it has taken place hold of 150 cities, 140 universities in all 31 provinces. This is unprecedented. So it's definitely something to take notice of. And in all sincerity, it's kind of not surprising. I mean, the way that the religious police have treated women in Iran has been absolutely unacceptable for quite a long time, at least my entire life. And if not longer, probably much, much longer. But anyway, and so this is not completely surprising. It is sad how many people are being killed and harmed. And yeah, I just don't understand how anyone could back and support a government that could do this to its own people. When your government's treating you like this, when this is what's going on, yeah, protesting is definitely something that is completely completely understandable. So that takes us into yet another situation on the other side. Well, no, not even the other side of the world. Quite close, actually. China. So China has had violent protests, and it started back because of some of the lockdowns that have been happening. And okay, I want to make sure I'm getting this all right because I don't want to misquote things. But basically, what happened was, um, there was some lockdowns because of the COVID situation in China, and that has led to kind of a violent response. And um, one of the people who've been commenting on this is one of the leaders of the Tiananmen Square protest back in 1989. And again, bear with me on my pronunciations because, well, my pronunciations are not always the best. But it is, oh gosh, and now I can't even find his name. Anyway, um, Wang is the last name. Wang Dan, and he has been posting about this whole situation. Basically, what happened was with the COVID lockdowns, the Chinese government was starting to weld people into their homes for non-compliance or concerns of spreading. And in one of these instances, the apartment complex caught fire, and these individuals who were trapped inside the building ended up dying because first responders could not get to them and they could not get out because they were quarantined. That's kind of ridiculous. That's actually more than kind of ridiculous. That's absolutely just terrifying that the government has the ability to weld you into your home and prevent you from leaving while it burns down. I yeah, I can understand why people are feeling like that's a bridge too far. And so they have started protesting. But because of the massive amount of censorship in China, instead of actually writing things on posters and like marching with them, the protesters have been protesting with blank pieces of paper because they know that whatever they write is going to get blanked out anyway. It's their way of saying, we want to speak for ourselves, but we are not allowed to. And so it's their active silence in drawing attention to the fact that they're not even allowed to speak out. Um, the other thing that has been just shocking to find out is that these protesters have been tracked by, well, no, not shocking. It's not shocking at all. Never mind. We're talking about China here. China has been tracking the protesters down with the assistance of Apple, according to the Daily Wire, using surveillance to track protesters and to stop their communication. So, Apple specifically, what they did is there's some sort of like chat function. It's their drop function or whatever. I don't know. Anyway, it allows people to like talk back and forth. Apple suspended that so that protesters could not use it. Um, and that just is kind of, ugh. And then you go into the fact that Apple has a um, it has a factory in China. This is one of their major factories. And this factory has been having supply chain issues. So they've been working with the government to keep that from, persisting. But the way they went about it was just really uncomfortable too, because violent protests broke out near the Apple factory, iPhone factory, over disputes with the contracts because they were saying that basically the company that Apple was using or whatever, the way things were being run was pretty shady. They had been locked into a closed loop. So they weren't allowed, they had to live at the factory, eat at the factory, sleep at the factory. They couldn't leave the factory so that the factory could keep running nonstop and so that the likelihood of an outbreak was decreased because it was a closed loop. And then they were being told that they weren't going to get paid until like after 2 months, or there was like pay disputes. And then with all of that like crummy work environment and pay issues, there was an outbreak at the plant. And people were like, okay, we're done. We're peacing out. We're done. And so they are desperately trying to get new employees back in. Um, Apple says, oh no, they didn't ever live there, but they did, and that it was all cleaned and disinfected. But anyway, Apple says they're working on it, and they're gonna improve. They're gonna do better. Honestly, I'm just gonna be completely level honest here. I've never been much of an Apple person. But that is not because of their politics. Although now I think I have a whole new reason not to buy Apple products. Um, Specifically iPhones. Never have had an iPhone. Never had an iPod. I, you know, anyway. Or any Apple products, but that's just usually because they're really, really expensive. And um my husband, who is a tech person, is not a huge fan of their like not letting people fix this stuff. He thinks right to repair should be a thing, and I'm perfectly fine with that. But before that was the extent of my opinion on Apple. Now I'm starting to wonder. I mean, they wouldn't unlock a phone used in a domestic terrorist situation here in the United States, and yet they're actively assisting the communist Chinese government to track down protesters and inhibit free speech. And they're okay with their employees being locked into a plant factory area and not allowed to leave so that their production can stay up. I'm just, yeah, I kind of have some issues with their business model right now. I kind of, yeah, that doesn't sit well with me. So, um, but anyway, the demonstrations have continued, but as the former leader of the Tiananmen Square protests points out, in every other instance in Chinese history since the Communist Revolution, any major protest has been no major protest has actually called for the removal of power of the communist leader at the time. And that is what the protesters are actually saying this time. They're actually calling for Xi Jinping's removal, which is a whole new development. And that's kind of one of those things that is significant. It is a new development. It is progression of the frustration of the Chinese people. And the fact that the economy is not doing well it's different because after Tiananmen Square, the economy actually improved. And so unrest dissipated. Basically, the unspoken agreement between the Chinese people and the government has been fine, we'll do things your way in regards to communism, and we'll play along as long as we can have our own personal lives. And now, with the COVID lockdowns, the government is deciding who gets to even leave their house, who gets to open their business and when, and if you don't like it, tough. And that is pretty intense, especially for people in places that have been locked down for quite a significant time. I believe one area was locked down for over 100 days. They're now telling the U.S. State Department is telling American expats to have a 14-day supply of food and water in their apartments or their homes at all times, as well as a backlog of any medication they may need. Because part of the death toll of COVID is the fact that they're not letting people out of their homes to receive medical care. There's been multiple cases of children dying because they were unable to get medication because their family was quarantined. So this is all over CNN. This is all over the networks. I think, yeah, and NBC, CNN, like everyone's covering this. It's absolutely shocking the level of just dictatorship, that just absolute authoritarian control that has come to exist in China. And I just feel like the response from the White House was massively underwhelming. Basically, they're like, well, they can speak for themselves. We're paying attention. Part of the protest is those blank signs because they can't speak for themselves. They had a British journalist get beat by the police, by the Chinese authorities because he was at a protest observing. Like kicked once he was on the ground. I just yeah. Okay. I guess that's one response, but so in all sincerity, at this point, I just, the average citizen in the United States, besides showing some solidarity with the Iranians and the Chinese, who've literally been pushed way too far by their authoritarian governments, maybe we could just point out to our government and some of our corporations that maybe they should stop trying to make deals with these people. I mean, the Iran deal that was on the table, I am so glad that's not happening, because we don't need to be helping somebody get a nuclear weapon who treats the women in their country this way and has killed 300 of their citizens and arrested 14,000 of them because the police. Okay, you want to talk about police brutality? Yeah, that's pretty much, you didn't wear this headscarf properly, so we're going to beat you to death. Great. There is, unfortunately, situations in which police officers do not handle things well, and people do occasionally receive injuries, even here in the United States and in other Western countries. It happens. But if you take a look at Iran and you take a look at China, the frequency and intent and severity is significantly different. And I can just only imagine what these women and these families are going through. Just the knowledge that their country has the right and the audacity to lock them, weld them into their homes if it wants to, is just absolutely mind bending. So, I mean, if you're a praying person, that is definitely something to be praying for. It just keeps reminding me of that song, the Christmas song, My Grown Up Christmas Wish. Oh my gosh. Yes, this is totally my grown up Christmas wish this year, that no more lives will be torn apart, that wars will never start. Like, man, if you're a praying person, meditating, whatever, this is definitely some things that can use some prayers. So I will keep you guys all appraised as this all develops. As I've mentioned in the past, I am expecting another baby. And as we get closer to the due date, which is after the holidays, things might become a little bit more hit and miss with episodes being uploaded. But I just, yeah, this is something that needs to be talked about. My heart goes out to the women in these countries, these mothers who are seeing how their children are being treated, how their families are being treated. I feel so blessed to be able to live in this country and to be able to raise my children in this country. And I am so grateful for my husband and all the other service members who have and are serving and have provided these basic freedoms for us. We have the ability to agree to disagree with our government. We have the ability to speak out for ourselves. Heck, I can make this podcast. That wouldn't be allowed in Iran. So as much as our country has things to work on, every country does. No one's perfect. No country is perfect. I am grateful for the freedoms and blessings we have. And I will end it on that note this week. As you know, you've been listening to It's Life of a Military Wife, and I am your host, Sam Wolf.